Let's set some ground rules here because we're in a bit of uncharted territory here. None of us expected an actual face-to-face discussion tonight. So let us all agree that we are going to be civil with each other. Let us all agree there will be no name-calling, and let us go forward. Mark, you've heard what they've had to say. Let me get your response initially.
Can I just correct one thing? Your three guests are not the complainants in the two suits against Maclean's that are proceeding. The complainants in British Columbia, in the case that begins next month, are Dr. Naya Habib and Mohammed El Masri, who is the head of the Canadian Islamic Congress. I would love to debate Mohammed El Masri, who is the sole plaintiff, by the way, in the federal case, which will follow the British Columbia
Just for what it's worth, El Masri was invited to be with us this evening, declined the
and
invitation.
he refused. Yeah. It's an interesting point that he's got a piece, you know, we've been talking about the right to reply. He's got a very heavy piece on the website, Canadian Islamic Congress at the moment, accusing Israel of ethnic cleansing and running concentration camps. Now, I could go to a Human Rights Commission, demand a right of reply, big right of reply to that.
You've got to call him. You don't need to.
No, and he's got a website, and that's the point. It's a free society. These guys have been complaining in the Globe and Mail, in the National Post, in the Toronto Star, in the Calgary Herald, in the Montreal Gazette, in the Ottawa Citizen, in the Halifax Chronicle, that they can't get their voices heard.
Would you acknowledge?
Their voices, I can't get those kind of editors to run stuff by me.
Their point is, had they not challenged Maclean's in the Human Rights Commission, nobody would be paying attention to their voice.
I don't think that's the case. For a start, you know, no disrespect, but I think this case is phony. They didn't go and see Maclean's until 6 months after the column appeared. In that time, Maclean's ran more letters about it, a lot of them pro and a lot of them anti, than they'd run on any other subject, including an organized campaign by the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, the principal lobby group in North America. The issue was over for that magazine, for a topical news magazine. If someone objects to this show, I didn't see your show on Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. I'm sure it was one of your hottest shows, Steve. But if someone shows up now and demands the right to reply to it, you say, whoa, man, we're a current affairs show, that's over.
Okay, we understand that issue. Let's get a response on this side of the table.
First of all, there are a few things. First of all, the Canadian Islamic Congress website is a completely different forum from Maclean's magazine. Maclean's magazine is a national news magazine that reaches, as Muniza just pointed out, over 2 million readers. The Canadian Islamic Congress website is a special interest website that, you know, mostly Muslim people come and read. There is an independent responsibility on Maclean's magazine that when it is putting an issue out there for the public, to allow us a reasonable opportunity to respond. I didn't interrupt you, sir. The second thing is that we did actually approach Maclean's a lot before the 6 months that was alleged. We actually approached them about 2 to 3 months into the matter after we had taken the time to research what Maclean's had been writing. Okay. Because you see, we weren't just concerned about one specific article, Steve. We were concerned about 22 articles.
I understand. And that's what we need. That's what we need to discuss now. I think the journalism and the access to journalism and the access to media debate has been had here tonight. You may not all agree on the particulars of the situation, but I think we've had a good airing out. What we need to discuss is what he's written. You object to what he's written.
Right.
And that's what we need to debate right now.
Yep.
You've heard what they've had to say about their criticism of what you've had to say. Yeah. Do you want to come back at that?
Well, I've read their dossier, the dossier on Maclean's so-called Islamophobia. By the way, as I said, I don't begrudge Dr. El Masri his Judeophobia, homophobia, and all the other phobias he has. So I'm not fussed by the fact that he finds me Islamophobic. I think these are phony baloney terms. I'm phobia-phobic. I'm more worried about creating a precedent where effectively the government becomes the arbiter between different phobias.
Okay, but you've heard the issue.
Yes, but I've heard the. Let's go to what's in their dossier about me. There's a sitcom review. I didn't find Little Mosque on the Prairie terribly funny. I didn't realize that in Canada it was an actionable offense not to find CBC sitcoms unfunny. There's something preposterous about claiming, going to a Human Rights Commission complaining about a CBC sitcom review. There's a review of a dystopian...
Let's do one at a time, one at a time, one at a time.
Let me bring up the other one. This dystopian novel by Robert Ferrigno. They credit to me plot twists from a novel set in an imaginary Islamic Republic of America in the year 2040. If you can't discuss plot twists in a review of a novel without being taken to court, there's no free speech.
I think we're going to have to respond to 2 points there. First of all, this is a very selective representation of what he has been writing. He says that he's just provided little twists to novels that have been written. What Mr. Steyn very commonly has done in his writing, since you've asked what the issues with his writings is, he's taken individuals who've been recognized broadly as promoting hatred against European Muslims, for instance, and representing them as heroic figures whose views need to be paid attention to by the majority of Canadian opinion in Canadian society. As an example, and a very good example of this is an article that he wrote, Celebrate Tolerance or You're Dead, in which he essentially takes what is the Italian equivalent of Ernest Zundel, Oriana Fallaci, and he says, racked by cancer, Oriana Fallaci spends most of her time in one of the few legal jurisdictions where she's not in legal jeopardy, where she pens magnificent screeds in the hope of rousing Europe to save itself from the impending Muslim...
You're equating Ernst Zundel with Oriana Fallaci?
Yes, I am. Impending Muslim takeover. Then, here are some examples of what Mr. Steyn says Fallaci says. And again, here, bear in mind that this article is being published in Canada, where it is being used to reflect on Canadian Muslims. And he says, Senora Fallaci moves on to livelier examples of contemporary Islam. For example, Ayatollah Khomeini's Blue Book and its helpful advice on romantic matters. If a man marries a minor who has reached the age of 9, and if during the defloration he immediately breaks the hymen, he cannot enjoy her any longer. Then Mr. Steyn adds his own comment, I'll say, I know it ruins my evening too. Also, a man who has had sexual relations with an animal.
We're not going to read all your documents. Just make the point.
You see, the point is that he uses this person to represent that Muslims commonly engage in sex with minors and animals.
Hang on.
All right. And he goes on and he says,
all right.
Look,
equal time. Is that what you're doing?
Look, Ayatollah Khomeini is not what, by any means, an obscure Muslim. He's probably the most influential Muslim figure of the last 30 years. And so it's not improper to quote Ayatollah Khomeini. I quoted him there for a cheap joke. But this is the interesting thing. Let's accept what you say. I don't say, by the way, that Muslims are all having sex with 9-year-old girls and the sheep, and then they're not eating the sheep after they've had sex with it. I don't say that anyway.
Well, it says it may be a sin to roast your 9-year-old wife, but the Ayatollah is not clear on that. So you are quite concerned about Muslims roasting their 9-year-old wives?
One at a time, please. Mark, finish your thought.
Let us say that you're right, that I've improperly quoted Ayatollah Khomeini, this obscure Muslim figure, Ayatollah Khomeini, no one's ever heard of. I've improperly quoted him. Why do you think that should be a criminal offence in Canada?
That's a question. Leave it there. What's the answer?
It's not a criminal offence. You see, this is the biggest fabrication here.
And this is something I want to touch on. I'm concerned when you say things like that. You've mischaracterized this complaint. You talk about us suing you. You talk about the fact that you're going to be thrown in jail. We filed with the commissions. And this is it. I think you're distorting the public perception. You're putting this view out there. No one wants to drag you through criminal prosecution. We're not dragging McLean through criminal prosecution. You're not a party to our complaint.
Yeah,
you're essentially going to be unaffected.
So you are. Let's dance.
You're talking about being sued.
You are lying again. You are lying again. We are complainants. We were complainants before the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which issued a public statement condemning you for condemning the Islamophobic material that you have been publishing.
Excuse me, I need to get in. You're all speaking at the same time. No one can understand you. We can't have that.